The show where there are no penalties, nothing is offside, and everything is fair game. This is The Gloves Are Off.
Welcome to The Gloves Are Off. I'm Moses Woldu. I'm back. Had a few weeks off, so it's nice to be re-energized and see you guys, especially you, Greg Buchanan, CPCA radio announcer. I know you've had a great time. Weather, not so much, but I know there's been some races that have been great, especially last Sunday.
Yeah, last Sunday, great races in Wainwright after a couple of rainouts and a 4-day show. Cut it down to just 2, but we're looking forward to Onion Lake this week, and then hey, we've got a lot of work in Calgary, but they said it's going to be hell or high water in Calgary, and we'll be at the Stampede in a week's time.
Scaled down, but they're doing an awesome job when it comes to the organization. You, my friend, I know we've got to meet personally a few times over the radio, and we now have you on Gloves.
That's right, looking forward to it. Just been here a month, so I'm glad to be on the show, hearing lots about it, so I had to be here. It was one of those things I needed to check off my list.
Well, your bucket list. You got family and girlfriend that want you on the show.
Yep.
And I know you're excited to go. Brendan Seeley, of course, Lloyd FM afternoon host. So.
Absolutely, looking forward to be here, talk some sports.
Yeah, well, we'll start off with the Stanley Cup final, and what a final. It looked like we were going to be heading to Game 7 in Chicago, but in a matter of 17 seconds, Brian Bickle and Dave Boland proved otherwise. 3-2 for Chicago, winning the series. It seemed like it didn't matter how much pressure, how physical Boston was. There was always an answer by the speedy Chicago Blackhawks. And was it just really a matter of time before the Hawks figured them out? Because down 2-1 after Game 3, momentum definitely shifted over to the Hawks' side. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, you know what I would say. So they're very crafty. Yeah, like you don't give it. They're always fast. They're always the guys with the hands, but they're very crafty players. I think that goes along with Joel Quenneville. He's just a great coach. And you get the guys, the character guys. You got Boleg in for a little bit. Then you got Stahlberg. You got people like that making a difference so that the guys like Taves, like Hossa, like Kane can actually put it in the nets. That went a long way. And I don't think Boston really had anybody with Gregory Campbell going out with all the injuries and stuff. They didn't really have somebody to deal with the lower end of Chicago's lineup.
Yeah, you know what? Chicago does have some great talent on there, offensive skill, both in their back end and their front end. But at the same time, they have a lot of grit too. In their third and fourth line, they're just as big and tough as any other team in the league. And Boston, they do play a physical game, and physical play can go either way on you. Physical play takes a lot out of yourself too, as well as it takes a lot out of the team that you're playing against. And I think Boston kind of, as the game went on last night, kind of sat back on their heels. They're up 2-1. Let's kind of hold on, force a Game 7. And maybe just didn't go offensive enough anymore. And they kind of sat back in a defensive zone, and they paid the price.
And you talk about offense, I think that was the biggest thing. After Game 3, Joel Quenneville decided to reunite both Kane as well as Taves.
Yeah.
You throw in Bickle, a nice, a grinding guy who seemed to be money when it came to playoff time. So you had a line that was reunited with a couple guys who love playing with each other. They proved to pay dividends, but yet you look on the other side, there wasn't that much. I think it really came down to what they did offensively. And if you look at both that Taves and Kane line, they literally broke Boston down single-handedly. Is that fair to say? What do you mention, especially with the play of Jaromir Jagr, who didn't score a goal? You had Tyler Seguin, who was phenomenal a few seasons back. During their Stanley Cup run in 2011, virtually non-existent, particularly in the finals. The loss of Bergeron after Game 5, even in Game 6, he wasn't himself, and we later learned why. He was quite injured.
Yeah.
But is it safe to say that offense prevailed, especially with a big, tough physical defense?
I think anytime in the playoffs, and they always talk about you got to play through your injuries, and everybody's banged up in one kind of form or another, and you have to battle through them. Chicago showed a lot of grit, and the job that Little Shaw did for their team is unmeasurable because he's a pest, he's physical, he's got some offensive upside too. Boston, when you look at how much minutes they had to rely on, basically one defensive pairing night after night after night, it eventually wears on you.
Yeah, absolutely. You look at the stats. Yager didn't get a goal in the series. Marchand, I don't think he had a point in the whole Chicago series either. Those are your main guys, and then you talk about Seguin, who's kind of been put down to the third line. And I mean, he's not a bad checker, but he's supposed to be there to score goals. And if he's your third line player, you got to think that's not going to be good for the Boston lineup.
Yeah, if you're a first two line player, you can't all of a sudden turn into a third line checker. And he can't be a third liner. For him to be effective, he has to be top six forward for Boston. If he isn't, then they're going to have to try to find someplace else for him to play.
Don't think it was the goalies who were an issue for both sides in that series. Hey, I do want to get to John Tortorella, who's been an issue at certain places he's been. Of course,
certain places.
Well, New York,
Tampa,
latter half. Of course, Tampa Bay, same thing. Although he did win a Stanley Cup and has proven that he can be effective, especially a jolt in the arm in his first couple seasons. Vancouver, a team that looks on the downslope. Tortorella, good fit. The fact that he might inject some life, at least immediately.
Yeah, I think Vancouver's had a bit of a kind of looking at it in from the outside and having some friends in the Vancouver market to cover the Canucks, and it's a bit of a country club feeling with Alain Vigneault there. I don't think he held a lot of guys accountable at night after night. Believe me, Torts will. At the same time, his little rants in the media like he likes to do in New York. You have to realize the Rangers were behind the Yankees. They were behind the Giants. They're like the fourth or fifth team on the list in New York when it comes to media. So he can get away with Brooksy, and he can get away with those little jabs at the media and treat them like, you know what? In Vancouver, they're number one, 12 months a year, every day. They're number one right at the top of the list. So I don't think he can get away with what he did in New York in Vancouver.
No, I agree with you. Yeah, being the top of the chain, you're going to be all eyes on you. And the fact of the matter is, he can yell, he can scream at the guys, but if they're not going to listen, if the Sedins aren't going to listen to him, if Burroughs isn't going to listen to him, any of those guys, then it's over before it even started. First practice in, if they're already like, this guy's nuts, then you're going to see that in the season, and he's going to be having his papers gone halfway through.
Dave Nonis is a guy who's really hands-on from a GM standpoint, likes to get into the regiment, was like that since he's taken over as the GM of the Vancouver Canucks. Will we see a little bit of a tiff, or are we going to see a little calmer, a little less from Torts, that so-called demeanor, and he'll be a little bit calmer in this sense?
I don't think you see a different Tortorella. That's his personality. That's the way he is. I think at the start, it may go over well. Maybe this is what they need. Maybe they need a bit of a yeller. But at the same time, after a while, you almost tune that coach out. Trust me, I've been on the other side, and I've had coaches that just constantly yell at you game after game after game, and after a while, because they're yelling at that top level night after night, you forget what he's even talking about. And I think for the first bit, he may have an effect on the team, but in the long term, he's a short-term fix for Vancouver. Don't expect to see him 3 years down the road in Vancouver.
All right, we're going to take a quick commercial break. When we come back, we're going to talk about Jonathan Bernier as he makes the move from the West Coast to one of the biggest hockey markets in the NHL. Stay tuned.